Welcome to the Taste China Learn English deep dive.
Yeah.
Um, Imagine you were sitting in this really high-end restaurant.
Right, like a really fancy place.
Exactly. And the chef brings out their signature, meticulously crafted dessert.
Okay, I am picturing it.
You take a bite, you look the chef dead in the eye, and you say, "This is not too sweet."
Oh, wow. Which, in a lot of Western kitchens, that comment might get you a really strange look.
Right. Or they might honestly just kick you out.
Yeah, they probably would.
But in Chinese culinary culture, you just gave them the absolute highest compliment possible.
You really did. It is the ultimate praise. And, it represents this massive shift in how we think about the end of a meal.
It totally flips the script, yeah.
Because if you are someone who usually feels like a twinge of guilt ordering a heavy chocolate cake after dinner,
Oh, yeah, definitely do.
right? Or if you constantly feel like desserts are just these giant sugar bombs, this philosophy is going to completely change how you view a treat.
Because in so many culinary traditions, I mean, the goal of a dessert is to be loud.
Yes, very loud.
You want that immediate, intense hit to your senses. The sugar is basically the star of the show.
Oh, absolutely.
We use words like decadent or rich or, indulgent.
Yeah, heavy words.
But this not too sweet philosophy is just so different. So, our mission today for this deep dive is to explore why this subtle approach exists.
And how it physically works on your palate, too.
Exactly. And how it shifts desserts from being these guilty pleasures that we have to apologize for into balanced, deeply comforting experiences.
So, to really understand how you build a dessert that earns the compliment not too sweet, we have to look past the finished plate.
Right.
We actually have to look at the pantry because the foundational building blocks of a cuisine, well, they dictate its whole philosophy.
That makes sense.
Think about what anchors a traditional Western bakery.
You are looking at butter, heavy cream, refined white sugar, and chocolates.
Exactly.
Those are the pillars. They are heavy, they are full of fat, and they are extremely high in simple carbs.
Right. But if you look at the foundations of Chinese desserts, you are looking at a completely different landscape.
What are we talking about here?
You see a heavy reliance on grains and legumes,
Yeah.
ingredients like red beans, mung beans, and glutinous rice.
Okay, beans for dessert.
Yeah. And when you remove the heavy dairy and those massive spikes of refined sugar, you are left with this canvas that just requires a totally different approach to flavor.
Well, let's talk about the red bean specifically because, according to our sources, it seems to be the absolute star ingredient.
Oh, definitely. Red bean paste.
Right. Hung Du Sha. It is sweet, it is earthy, and it is exceptionally smooth.
And you find it everywhere.
Everywhere. It is stuffed inside steamed buns. It is hidden inside sticky rice balls. It is baked into cakes.
It's super versatile.
But I have to pause here for a second. Because for a palate that grew up chasing like a chocolate Heinz,
Sure.
using beans for dessert sounds a bit like a trick.
It does sound counterintuitive to a lot of people.
Right. It sounds like someone is trying to force you to eat a savory side dish at the end of the meal. So how does a bean paste actually satisfy a sweet tooth?
It is a totally valid hesitation.
Okay.
But it really comes down to the mechanics of taste. Think about what heavy cream and butter actually do in your mouth.
Yeah.
They literally coat your tongue in a thick layer of fat.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. And to taste anything through that fat, you have to add massive amounts of refined sugar and super strong flavoring.
Because the fat is blocking the taste buds.
Exactly. But when you use a legume like a red bean, you are dealing with complex carbohydrates and very little fat.
Ah.
So it does not coat the palate in the same way.
So your taste buds are actually more exposed.
Mm.
They're like more sensitive to what is happening.
Precisely. And because you are not delivering this massive, blinding spike of pure sugar.
Which kind of numbs your mouth anyway.
Right. Sugar numbs your taste buds to anything else after the first few bites. But with beans, you encourage the eater to pay closer attention.
That makes a lot of sense.
Relying on legumes provides a very grounded, natural sweetness. The roasting and boiling process of the beans actually brings out this deep, earthy aroma.
So you actually start tasting the roasted quality of the bean itself rather than just tasting the sugar.
Yes, you get this slight nuttiness and that smooth, velvety texture. The added sugar in red bean paste is really only there to elevate those natural flavors, not to mask them.
Wow.
It satisfies the sweet tooth because it brings your meal to a gentle, comforting close. It doesn't send your blood sugar on this violent roller coaster ride.
You know, it reminds me of the difference between walking into a room with blaring pop music versus walking into a room with a quiet, beautifully played acoustic guitar.
That is a great analogy.
Because with the pop music, you don't have to try to hear it, it just hits you.
It forces you to listen.
Right. But with the acoustic guitar, you have to physically quiet your own body. You have to lean in and focus to appreciate the nuance of the strings.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. The flavor profile of these legume-based desserts is very acoustic.
I like that.
And because the flavor isn't screaming at you, something else has to step up to make the experience memorable.
Oh,
If the flavor is quiet, the texture has to be loud.
and this brings us to one of the most fascinating concepts in this entire culinary landscape. The texture isn't just an afterthought here, right?
Not at all.
It is basically treated as a primary flavor.
Yeah.
And the most valuable player here is glutinous rice.
Yes, sticky rice.
It is used to create this signature sticky, chewy feeling that is highly prized. And in Chinese, there's a specific, widely used term for this perfect texture, which is Qiutan.
Right. Qiutan is an essential concept. I mean, if you want to understand Chinese sweets, you have to understand the mechanics of Qiutan.
Now, the closest English translations usually point to words like elastic or bouncy.
Yes, bouncy is a good word.
It means the food is capable of being stretched out and then sort of returning to its shape. But honestly, when you
Yeah.
hear the words elastic or bouncy, you naturally think of a rubber band.
You do.
Or you think of a toy ball bouncing down the sidewalk. It doesn't really sound like something you want to chew on. So how does bouncy translate to a luxurious dessert experience?
Well, we have to contrast it with what we typically expect from a dessert. Think about a classic Western sponge cake or maybe a mousse.
Okay, super soft stuff.
Right. The ideal texture there is often described as melting in your mouth
Yeah, that is definitely a compliment for a cake.
because it requires almost zero effort. It just dissolves. But a Q-tan texture operates on a completely different mechanical principle. It is basically like a kinetic feedback loop.
A kinetic feedback loop, that sounds like engineering, not baking.
Well, culinary arts and engineering are closer than we think. When you bite into a Q10 dessert, let's say a fresh glutinous rice ball, it doesn't just disappear.
Right.
It acts almost like a culinary trampoline. It absorbs the force of your bite and then it physically pushes back against your teeth.
Oh, wow. So it resists you? You can't just passively swallow it?
Exactly. It demands your active participation. This mechanical rhythm of chewing is deeply satisfying on a tactile level.
I can see that.
Engaging your jaw muscles, feeling that elasticity pushback, it stimulates saliva production and creates a physical memory of the food.
So the joy is not just in the taste on your tongue.
No, it is in the physical mechanical act of eating it. That bounce compensates for the subtle flavor. It makes the quiet dessert physically engaging.
Okay, so we have these earthy acoustic flavors from the beans, and we have this rhythmic, engaging, bouncy Q10 texture from the glutinous rice.
Yes, those are the building blocks.
Now we have to look at what happens when you combine these elements into actual iconic dishes.
Hmm.
Because these aren't just snacks you grab at a convenience store, right?
Not at all.
Many of these desserts carry massive cultural and emotional weight. They are deeply tied to festivals, history, and family.
This is where the cuisine really transcends simple nourishment. The food becomes a physical manifestation of cultural values.
Let's start with Tengyuan. These are sweet rice balls, typically eaten during the Lantern Festival.
Oh, they are so good.
And visually, they are stunning. You have these small, pristine, delicate white balls made from that glutinous rice.
Right.
And they're often served floating in a hot, clear, fragrant ginger syrup. But the real magic happens when you bite into them.
The contrast is just brilliant.
It really is. You break through that bouncy white exterior, and suddenly this rich, dark black sesame liquid flows out like hot lava.
It is amazing.
The sensory experience of the warm ginger heat, the elastic chew of the rice, and the rich nuttiness of the sesame all hitting at once. But beyond the mechanics, they represent something very specific, which is unity.
Yeah, the symbolism is deeply woven into the physical form of the dessert.
How so?
It represents the state of being joined together with family, in agreement, and wholeness. The round shape of the Tangyun itself mirrors the round tables that families gather around to eat.
Oh, that is beautiful.
And the stickiness of the rice symbolizes family members sticking together through difficult times. Every single element of the dish reinforces the idea of unbroken bonds.
That concept of wholeness is incredible. But then, if we swing to the other end of the dessert spectrum, we find a pastry that also carries massive festival weight,
I know what you're going to say.
but it does it through sheer physical force. We have to talk about mooncakes.
Yes, mooncakes.
These are often referred to as the fruit cakes of China, mostly because of their reputation and their intense density.
Density is definitely the defining characteristic of a traditional mooncake. They are heavy, they are thick, they are packed incredibly tightly.
They're so dense that a single mooncake contains enough caloric energy to fuel you for a whole day.
Yeah, you really do not want to eat a whole one by yourself.
No, you slice it into small wedges and share it.
Yeah.
And the fillings are fascinating. You might have a thick, heavy lotus seed paste mixed with nuts.
Right.
But then, right in the dead center of this very dense, sweet paste, you will often find a whole, cured, salty duck egg yolk.
And that salty egg yolk is where the philosophy of not too sweet reaches its absolute peak physical expression.
Because putting a highly salted, savory egg yolk in the middle of a heavy, sweet pastry sounds like the ultimate culinary hack.
It really is.
It forces the dessert to be balanced. But is it just a flavor trick, or is there like a deeper biological reason for doing this?
Oh, it is far more than a simple trick. It is actually a biological necessity for enjoying the pastry, and it reflects the broader concept of yin and yang.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's look at the mechanics. Lotus seed paste is extremely lipid dense and intensely sweet.
Oh, so heavy.
Right. If you were to eat a solid block of just that paste, your palate would experience extreme fatigue within 2 bites. The heaviness would completely overwhelm your senses.
It would become exactly what they're trying to avoid. Too sweet, too rich, too loud.
Exactly. But when you introduce the salty, savory duck egg yolk, you create a biological reset.
Biological reset.
Yeah. The salt cuts through the lipid density of the paste. It triggers your salivary glands to flush the palate, creating a sharp contrast that makes the next bite of the sweet paste taste fresh again.
Wow, that is incredibly smart.
You need that extreme sweetness to be countered by the rich, savory saltiness to achieve true balance. A dessert that is only sweet is considered one-dimensional. It lacks harmony.
So the salt actually allows you to continue enjoying the sweet. It creates a cycle. But There's also a symbolic element to that egg yolk, right?
Sure.
Because it looks exactly like a full moon sitting in the night sky of the lotus paste.
Yes, the visual is unmistakable. Eaten during the Mid-Autumn Festival, the mooncake is the ultimate symbol of togetherness and survival.
Survival.
Yeah, the dense, concentrated energy was historically practical for storing food. But culturally, sharing that dense pastry signifies sharing life's burdens and joys. Both the tanyun and the mooncake are designed to nourish the family bond just as much as they nourish the physical body.
Nourishing the body. That is the perfect bridge to our final concept. Because if these desserts are fundamentally designed to be balanced, to use earthy ingredients, and to avoid overwhelming sugar spikes,
Yes.
it opens the door to something that completely redefines the very category of sweets. We're talking about desserts that are actually meant to function as medicine.
This is perhaps the most difficult concept for a Western-trained palate to grasp.
Tell me about it.
Just the idea that a dessert could be actively beneficial for your health.
Because in the West, dessert is almost exclusively framed around guilt. Think about the language we use, you know?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be bad and have a piece of cake.
Exactly. This is my cheat day.
Yeah.
Or, I shouldn't, but I will. We moralize sugar.
Yeah.
But in southern China, there's a massive tradition of tangshung, which translates literally to sweet soup.
Right. Sweet soup.
These are warm liquid desserts, and a prime example from the sources is white fungus and pear soup.
Now, white fungus and pear soup sounds highly specific to someone who hasn't had it, but its functional purpose is universally understood by anyone who grew up with it.
Well, the descriptions for this soup don't use words like decadent or indulgent. They use words like refreshing and soothing.
Yes, soothing is the perfect word.
And soothing means to make you feel calm, to physically take away pain or discomfort. In this case, it is specifically meant to soothe a dry or irritated throat.
It works wonders for that.
But the part that really shifts the paradigm is that eating this dessert is considered highly beneficial for the skin. It acts as an internal beauty routine.
It really does.
Just imagine telling your friends, I'll be right there. I just need to finish my dessert for my skincare regimen. It changes everything.
It is wild to think about, right? Let's break down the functional mechanism of why it works. White fungus, when it is boiled down in a soup, develops this gelatinous, almost slippery texture.
Okay.
It acts as a natural humectant.
A humectant meaning something that retains and preserves moisture.
Correct. As you consume it, that gelatinous texture literally coats the mucous membranes in your throat and digestive tract.
Oh, wow.
Meanwhile, in traditional Chinese medicine, pears are classified as having cooling properties and providing deep hydration.
So they work together.
Exactly. So when you combine them with a very light, subtle rock sugar, you are not just making something that tastes good, you are creating a functional hydration delivery system.
You are literally building a remedy.
Yes. And understanding that completely removes the moral baggage of cheating on a diet.
Right, because you aren't cheating.
Exactly. When you view a dessert as a soothing remedy, clearing heat from the throat, nourishing the skin, settling the stomach, it transforms the act of eating it into an act of self-care.
You aren't fighting your body's natural desire for something sweet. You are answering that desire with something that actually supports your body's daily functions.
It is functional comfort.
Right? You aren't just consuming empty calories for a quick dopamine hit. You're
Mhm.
consuming a tool that has a designated job to do in your body.
And this brings us all the way back to the very first point we made about the pantry.
Oh, about the ingredients.
Yeah. You cannot have a dessert function as a soothing health food if the baseline is built on refined white sugar and heavy cream.
That makes total sense.
It only works because the entire ecosystem of the cuisine is built on legumes, grains, fruits, and subtle sweetness. The ingredients allow for a much healthier psychological relationship with the concept of a treat.
Well, it has been a fascinating journey through completely different culinary universe today.
It really has.
We started by looking at how grounding, earthy ingredients like red beans and mung beans replace heavy dairy, giving us a sweetness that invites us to pay attention rather than numbing our palates.
We explored the mechanics of Qton, too.
Right, seeing how a bouncy, elastic texture acts like a kinetic feedback loop, making the physical act of chewing deeply engaging.
And we also saw how those textures and flavors are elevated into symbols of unity and survival.
Like the molten sesame, the tangy one.
Exactly. Or the dense, salty, sweet balance of the mooncake that resets the palate.
And finally, we unpack the idea of sweet soups, reframing the very definition of dessert from a guilty cheat day indulgence into a functional medicinal act of self-care. It is just a radically different approach to how a meal should end.
It offers a lot of wisdom that goes far beyond the dinner table, actually, which leaves us with a final thought for you to consider.
Let's hear it.
We spend so much of our lives defining a treat as a momentary indulgence.
A deliberate break from the rules.
Right, a sudden spike of intense pleasure that usually leaves us feeling drained afterward. But what if you took this not too sweet philosophy and applied it to your own life?
Oh, I like that.
If you stopped chasing the loudest, most overwhelming sensory spikes and instead sought out subtle, functional comfort, how might that reshape not just what you eat, but how you reward yourself in every other aspect of your life?
It is a really powerful question. If we stop looking for the loudest experience in the room, we might finally have the space to appreciate the gentle, deeply soothing things that actually make us feel whole. Because sometimes the absolute highest compliment you can give to any experience is simply that it wasn't too much. It was perfectly balanced.